Cursor is not laying down. Cursor is going to show up and they're going to fight back.
Probably nobody else wants this, right? This works really well for me.
Okay, and drive an automatic. I'd like an automatic in my coding editor. The timeline is a year is too long now. So we are going to do our January 2026 prediction. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, we're going to do monthly predictions. What I was getting out of it felt fantastic. And I didn't want to stop, right? I didn't want to stop. I wanted to have agents going. I don't know how to do this 7-hour business.
The answer is you might continue, enter, continue, enter, continue, enter, because it will always send one message in. So it's like...
That is the best pro tip hack I have ever heard. Just like, you want agents to keep working, just queue up a bunch of enter commands and then go to bed.
I learned it from the best. Hello, welcome back to the show that doesn't have a name with Dan Vinegar and me, Armin, and we're going to talk about agentic coding again, or just AI stuff.
Well, first off, hey everybody. How was your holidays though? Armin, did you have a good holidays?
Actually, part of the reason why I had a lot of time coding was because I caught norovirus, I think, or a version of that, which was not enjoyable. So
this took a turn. I was not prepared. I was not prepared. Okay. Well, look, you were sick, but everybody was definitely very busy to the degree, and it almost felt like everybody had their holiday stuff that they had to get done. And then maybe almost for like, leading up to New Year's, now I felt like everybody had collectively decided to try Claude Code. That was like a big thing for me, to the point where I thought I was like, I thought that like the X algorithm had changed, or that this was like a mass hallucination.
But I have some independent data points, right? It's not just the algorithm. I think it was real. What was really interesting is, for instance, one of Sentry's Sentry's still engineer manager, but like I used to work with the guy. He was like all of a sudden tweeting about Claude, and I know that he was looking at this before, but then I was like, hey, like, did you also like catch the bug now? So like, yeah, now I had time to dive in, but there's a difference between knowing it and sort of catching the addiction in a way. And for that, you need time, right?
I was using OpenCode exclusively actually over the holidays. I was trying to go deeper with OpenCode, and randomly I fired up Claude maybe a few days later, and I noticed it was like, hey, you got a bunch of guest passes. Do you want to hand out these guest passes? And that's when it finally clicked for me that this could have been a guest pass fueled mania.
Well, and there was higher limits. Don't forget that.
One thing about that, like one takeaway, if that's true, like I don't know, but I suspect it played a significant part. For example, my reaction was I shared my guest passes with some friends, like, hey, you should try this. One takeaway is, if we've been doing this for a while, like we think nothing of whatever, spending 20, 30, I'm on a $200 a month plan. You're on something similar. The value is so obvious that, I'll try these tools. It's no problem. But for a lot of people, for actually getting access in a really like easy, cheap way and to get started is like a real invitation. And I'd kind of forgotten about that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
This was a theme, I think, of our last talk too, right? I got the impression that a lot of users who were trying Claude for the first time were Cursor users. Does that track?
I believe so. And I did a tweet maybe like a month ago where I was asking like why people use Cursor. Actually, sorry, I didn't ask why people use Cursor. I asked like, what are you using other than Claude? And sort of, I basically asked a bunch of Cursor users like why they're using Cursor. And the big reason why they're using Cursor is because their employer pays for it. Particularly if you're bound to like a hardware device that has actually Cursor on it, but you can't actually use it at home because of like SSO or whatever. Cursors might actually also be a reason for you to like look at other things. If you don't want to pay for it and you get it through your work, you use whatever the work pays for, right?
Yeah. A lot of people don't want to spend their own money. That's totally valid. So this is, I think, just feeds the lock-in is real. It could be like an employer lock-in. You're provided this tool for your work. It's the thing you get comfortable with. And it takes like a mass guest pass event to get you to try other things. So it's not just that people were trying Claude. You felt that people were also trying other tools. I was using OpenCode a lot. I guess that's one example. Certainly OpenCode seemed to get a lot of activity over the holidays, and that's like another terminal-based TUI agentic coding platform like Claude Code. This is where you can jump in and tell me about like I saw Codex a few times. Like,
So I saw a lot of stuff pop up over Christmas that got more traction than I think before. OpenCode was an obvious one. I think OpenCode has a lot of traction right now, and obviously also in part because it's compatible with your subscription. So if you have a Claude subscription, you can actually use it with OpenCode. Then like if you're already hooked on this idea, like OpenCode has a bunch of really useful features that sort of make it feel like more powerful than like if you just use Claude Code as a harness. The one thing that sort of really popped up over Christmas was like Joffrey did this project like already like months ago. I think like in May, like the Ralph Wiggum thing. But Boris from Anthropic finally joined Twitter. He was tweeting somewhere on one of his first tweets that he's using Ralph, and then people went to Claude Code to get the Ralph plugin from the marketplace.
okay,
So like
you're
all of this sort of
a lot of stuff
sorry.
happened, but let's slow down. There was a lot of words there that you were dropping. Who is Boris? And
Boris Boris
yeah.
Cherny is the person that is widely credited as having created/invented Claude Code. He is also somewhat famous for having gone to Cursor for 2 weeks and then come back to Anthropic, or at least that was the reporting. I don't know if it was ever confirmed. And he has only interacted with people on threads until early Christmas. I think he
Okay.
joined X in mid-December or something.
So on top of this, on top of guest passes, and if this was all planned, this is very clever by Anthropic. You have the creator of Claude showing up and being like, "Hey, here's how I use Claude. You might find it interesting. Here's all the ways in which I use it. Take these tips for yourself." I saw this thread, and it was very useful. I don't think I clued into the fact that he had not been writing before. I just thought it was like, "Oh, this is a great thread. Very interesting." Okay, so recommend you find this thread. Man, just a lot going on over the holidays. So look, we heard from OpenCode. We heard a lot of people trying OpenCode. We heard a lot of people trying Claude. Where's Cursor? Where's Cursor in this?
So I think part of the reason why we hear so much about OpenCode, I think part of the reason why we hear so much about Claude Code and also Codex is because all of those things work with the best models at good prices. I know $200 is expensive. Like, don't get me wrong. I pay a lot of for tokens, but it is like if you're deep in on it, it's really good. And Cursor sort of has a pricing problem in that sense. It's more expensive comparatively. Like if you're really going into agentic coding, it's like the value proposition is not quite there. And what has definitely happened is that more and more people started like really giving up on the IDE and just going to the agent. Like there's more and more people that sort of play, especially for Christmas, they played with like hands-off agent vibing. And so the value proposition shifting, I think.
Can you take a moment to explain that pricing difference? Because I think that we take it for granted. But look, we just saw like a lot of people activate on these products. And you mentioned earlier that they offered 2x usage over the holidays, and that had a meaningful impact, probably. What do you mean when you say that Cursor is more expensive? Can you just kind of like go a little more deeper into that?
So specifically right now, for a lot of people, the $100 subscription on Claude Code or the $200 subscription on Claude Code and Codex is more than they need. But it is cheaper than if they were to pay API prices. And also you couldn't pay individually for API prices like this. Like you would actually have to go through OpenCode at the moment to get the rate limits that you need for agents. But like there are people like a friend of mine, Peter, if you were to tally up his token usage that he did from I think September or something to December, the total was something like 350 billion tokens. If we were to put that in monetary terms, it would be like $70,000. He only paid 2,500 or something like this. I forgot exactly what he paid because the subscription is so discounted.
So basically, like if you're using Claude, and are there any other providers that give a plan with similar usage?
So Codex has a $200 plan. Claude has a $200 plan. OpenCode secretly launched a black plan, which was only there for like 15 minutes or whatever. Well done, Dex.
It's back. It's back. It's being dripped out. Yeah.
I don't know what the limits are not going to be clear, but there are some. I also heard there are some people using Factory, I think it's a Factory IO. I think they might also have like a $400 plan that's quite I don't know. I'm not
Okay,
paying that much. So, but there, like the discounts are real. I think is.
So if you're somebody spending, using just a ton of tokens, these $200 plans, you're getting below the market rate, especially if your usage is high. Now, Cursor I think even has like a $200 plan, or is that not true? Is it more like you're paying more market rate with Cursor? Is that the difference?
So I think part of the problem here is like I don't want to guess what their current offering is because I literally haven't used Cursor in months. But what I do know is that the tokens what you get out of, or let me put it this way, secondhand knowledge from people using Cursor that I know, they don't get that much usage out of it that's anywhere close if you were to use the premium models, which is Opus and Codex. You get a lot of the usage out if you use a new model that they have, which is called something
So
like
there's an element of hearsay
instruction.
here. Like we don't actually know,
Absolutely.
right? We don't know.
I cannot tell.
Cursor lawyers, we don't know. This is
We do
we
not
are
know.
not professionals. The argument behind that is that, if you're buying from Claude, you're mainlining from the LLM provider itself, from Anthropic, and they're in a position like they are probably subsidizing a lot of this. And Codex, that's from OpenAI, similar story. But in Cursor's case, with an asterisk, they do have their own model, which is Composer. You're often sort of like round tripping to Anthropic or to other model providers through Cursor, and that they're not in the same position to, offer you this kind of like the same kind of
That's what
package.
it seems like right now, but I think that also like these things change all the time.
Hmm.
And it is very conceivable that they can come up with their own model, but also that they make really good pricing arrangements. Like they have money at this point. So I wouldn't say like just because like maybe right now the value proposition doesn't seem to be there,
Right.
that it's like inherent to the business. I don't want to make that statement. It just seems like right now they haven't focused on subsidizing it as much, I think, as some other providers
Okay. And this is our perception, right?
have.
Which is very fallible and subjective. And that's like my perspective too, or at least my experience using Cursor was kind of being like I still do. I think this came up last time, but I use Cursor. I have a paid plan for Cursor, which is like, I don't know, $20 or $30 a month. And then I inject open code or I inject Claude into that IDE, and I use both like an insane person. And I still do use actually the Cursor agent sometimes, if only just to mess around with different models and just sort of like see how this works. And I find that I will hit the usage limits quite quickly, right? That's what I've observed. That this is not like a maxed out $200 plan, to be clear. So, but the perception that I've gotten as a user is that I have to be sort of like way more
Let's
on
put it this
top
way:
of my tokens.
if the reality is different, then right now I would recommend them to do something marketing wise because my my
Yeah.
perception just like getting the vibes is like I right now it doesn't seem like I'm particularly interested in sort of like diving back in. But I will say biggest reason actually is that I gave up on the IE. Like I'm not using IDs right now. And I think like it's not that Claude has such a great terminal user interface experience. That's not it. But like the way I'm interacting with the code now is no longer like I used to. So this sort of tab complete thing is like to me is completely. I don't know when I hit the tab key like last time. I turned off auto tab complete stuff everywhere now. That's where I moved.
I want to come back to this, but I'm not done quite yet because I think there's one more thing I want to talk about, this sort of holiday mass hallucination uptake of different AI coding projects. And of course, like a big factor is that people have free time. It's a huge one, probably the biggest one at the end of the day. But I have like an observation. I want to know if you think this is true or not. When we did this last time, there was a couple new model releases. Gemini had something new. I don't know if this happened by the time we recorded it, but ChatGPT 5.2 came out. These numbers are starting to be irrelevant. It's starting to feel irrelevant, by the way. Like, I'm just throwing numbers out there. But when that happened, you have like the week of everybody kind of being like, wow, this is the best model ever. Blew me away. And then you never hear about it. 2 weeks later, two takeaways from that. One, new models dropping didn't really drive a lot of people to take up agentic coding tools. That wasn't enough. Opus 4.5 has been out since November.
And it took December for people to realize that it's good.
Yes. That's kind of what I wanted to touch on. This was even what we talked about last time, which was like, oh, these new models dropped. What do you think about that? Nah. And I had been using it at the time. I'd been using Opus at the time, and I was still kind of developing an opinion. Like, it takes some time.
I agree. I did not realize how much better it is until Christmas. And I was using it day to day, right? I don't know what to think about it because, like, on the one hand, it's like you feel the model and then you get sort of idea what you can do with it and whatever. Like, so it's like it takes a while for you to sort of like acclimate in it. And I also noticed there's a huge rift right now between people that so a small detour, but there's a huge difference between Opus and Codex, and not in terms of the quality, but in terms of how they work. Codex to me, I would describe as it's a lucky draw. It goes really deep. It thinks it does something, but you cannot interact with it until it's done. Like if I say like, "Hey, what if I do this?" It's like, "Well, we could do this." Stop thinking. Stop doing anything. Like you can prompt it. You let it go. It will work. Like I had Codex work an entire night for a refactor. 7.5 hours. I saw that. Like I took like screenshots along the way. It was 7.5 hours through 6 compactions to refactor my game from SDL2 to like SoCal. It was impressive, but I cannot on a daily basis interact with it because like I wanna like talk with it. I wanna do some stuff, and Opus does this, right? And so I noticed that as these two sort of new releases, like Opus and Codex, as people got more feeling of how to work with it, like two camps emerged. The ones that really loved Codex and the ones that really loved Opus. And even those models are like months old at this point. Like it took like a month or so for like everybody sort of to get to pick their favorite model and like really get to understand how to make it work really well. I found this interesting. I didn't notice that as much before, I think.
I know for me, I would say that I did notice, and you can even see this in my ramped up usage. I noticed that I was doing a lot more things in parallel because I increasingly got comfortable and I started to see that the results were pretty good. And then I reached kind of like a zen point where I could kind of have 3 agents going at once for like the right kind of task, eventually get a feel for this. And if I went and looked at my sort of like CC usage, which is a terminal command that tells you a little bit about how you're using Claude, I noticed that it was getting a lot higher. And I don't think it's because the tokens were more expensive. I'd been using the previous version of Opus as well. It was just that the number of kind of concurrent projects that I was doing got really high. And I noticed that I was working more. I was staying up late, and I was working late in part because
One more
what I was
prompt.
getting out of it felt fantastic. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to stop, right? I didn't want to stop.
Yeah.
I wanted to have agents going. I don't know how to do this 7-hour business. Maybe the best I can do is like, press a button before I go to bed, and maybe it goes for 30 minutes. And when
Oh,
I wake
no,
up, it'll be there.
I learned this from Peter. The answer is you might continue, enter, continue, enter, continue, enter, because it will always you always send one message in. So it's like when
Look,
it's done, it just keeps doing.
that is the best pro tip hack I have ever heard, which is like, you want agents to keep working, just queue up a bunch of enter commands and then go to bed.
I learned it from the best.
There are people right now who are like hardcore engineering these insane harnesses to like get things to go, and they're just getting completely outclassed by somebody who's queued up 10 enter commands in a row. I think that's fucking hilarious.
Well, I don't know if it was outclassed. It's just I noticed that others are doing that, and for a certain type of task it works. And actually, I think that to me, like I still can't work with Codex, and I do pay for ChatGPT Pro, so I have Codex and I use it extensively for review. I am impressed how good it can continue working post compaction, because Opus cannot. Like when Opus compacts, it's trash. But when Codex, the command line tool, and the model, when they compact, they keep remembering what they're doing. It's really well tuned for that. So there's definitely some differences here, but
It's painful how this is vibes, right? It's like it is vibes because, how do you quantify this? I felt the compaction with Opus 4.5 is better. I felt that it could go further than in the past. This might be a good segue to talk about AMP. And this episode has taken a bit of a turn because I think we got a little bit more into the primitives of all of this stuff last time. And this has just been more of a like, boy, it's been a hell of a year, right? Like that Tintin comic. And
uh-huh.
Armin, you're like, then it's January 8th. Like a lot has happened, and it's hard to summarize it all. Do you want to talk AMP a little bit?
Yeah. Look, I think AMP had a little bit sort of the same problem over Christmas as Cursor had, which is like it's more expensive, right? But
Can we go back for a moment here with AMP? So look, that was probably a third of our episode last time. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe like 10 minutes. You were really enamored with AMP. And here we are. It's like not even that, a month later, didn't even come up. So what's going on with AMP? I used it and I have something to talk about it, but I wanted to like check in with you.
so I still use it. I don't use Claude Code anymore. I use the subscription. I use it with Pi. This is a coding engine friend of mine, and this is like where a lot of my usage now goes. But then I also use AMP still. And the reason I use both Pi and AMP is because they do something very similar, which is I feel like it's built by people that are using it. And they're kind of trying to see like how far can you go with the harness. And for me, who was also working on agents, it's just really, really, really interesting to kind of see this kind of exploration. Right. So AMP tried a whole bunch of really interesting novel things, like handoff as an example, stuff like this. And that really got me excited. And the way I describe is like AMP is sort of like the Apple or the Porsche of like a coding agent, which is like if you just want a really good coding agent, it's like it's the curated version of it with some really cool ideas, and it's kind of pushing a little bit the boundaries of what it can do in the harness. They can't really do anything on the model side because they don't build a model. That's why I still use it, right? It's like this. It's very interesting to see what they can do, and the exploration of like what it can do.
Okay. And when you mean harness, you're kind of talking like the wrapper, right? What would you describe
Yeah.
as a harness? We've talked about a bunch of them so far, right?
So it's basically like the thing that runs the loop and provides the tools and the prompts and all of that stuff. And look, actually, one thing that also happened, I think, during the period of it is like skills took off, right? Like last time, I think when we talked,
Skills.
skills were
Skills.
not yet like really widespread. But that I think also happened over Christmas. Like people realized like how good skills are now. So like AMP also supports them. Like I think OpenCode at this point does like a lot of these agents too.
Skills move beyond just the Anthropic platform into other things. And this was also a theme from last time, which was like having what we called like proprietary extensions, right? That maybe aren't so proprietary anymore, which is interesting. But let's not sidetrack too much from AMP. So your interest in AMP is you're like, they're really innovative on the harness level, is what you're saying, right? And you talked about handoff there. So when we talked about this, I had not used AMP, and a couple things that we could talk about are that I wanted to report back. I wanted to report back that I used it for about like a full day of work. Okay, that's like all day. That's all I used. The way I used it is I went to the website and I installed it, and it was like install it to VS Code/Cursor. So that's how I did it. I didn't actually know that you could use it that way. I thought it was its own editor, and I had to commit to a whole new editor thing. I don't know where I got that idea. But I don't think I'm completely confused because I was sharing this with my coworker Justin today, and he said I thought the exact same thing. So somewhere we've gotten that idea. Is that one? Is that wrong? Yes, no. Do you know what I'm talking about?
So I don't know the origin story, but I remember that the editor integration was much more visible, pitched on the website than it is today, and I've never used it. So, but I would not be surprised if that actually came prior to the terminal user interface.
So that's one. So I was like, oh, it's easier to get going, and I wouldn't say that it was like the best integration. It's not bad. I actually think how I'm using like injecting Claude or OpenCode. I think I prefer that, but you get comfortable with these things. So, but I do understand the comment about handoff. So what I really liked about AMP that I've not seen other coding agents do to the same degree is that when your context starts running out, and that was a big topic last time, you're managing all this, how many tokens you're using, it has a whole kind of like interface and means of being like, instead of just starting a new session and starting over or compacting, do you want to hand off? And presenting an interface of like, here is what we are going to present to the next kind of session so you can start from here. And I thought that was the experience was really good. It kind of shined a light on how that even the handoff even works versus, with if you're with Claude, and I think Cursor is the same way where you just kind of get, compacting, right? And you don't really understand what's going on. And immediately when I saw what was in there, I started editing it. And I liked that experience. I felt like oh, I can actually kind of keep this session going on way better because of this kind of interface. And it shows a lot. Like there is like a lot of innovation that can be done just on the UI, right?
This is why I like why I like the people that are working on it, because it feels like, oh yeah, they're using it and sort of they seem to be using it similar to how I enjoy it. And then this handoff stuff, as an example, was like, yeah, like I like to have restart all the time, and like this makes compaction kind of work for me. And AMP has also this thing where like if you have a thread, so if you do this handoff, right? I don't know if you used this recently, but if you do a handoff in AMP, like it does the thing and it has this like new fresh context with like the old information that came from a handoff, but it also says, hey, this is a continuation from thread blah blah blah. If you need to consult it, here's the thread ID, and then AMP knows how to read the old thread, which I think is also like, it's such a
That's
cool
good.
thing that it can read its own history. I wouldn't call it innovation necessarily, but I think we're like collectively learning a little bit more like what cool patterns are, how these work. And when it's in the harness, it's like it's easy to discover, I would say.
How about this? We are collectively benefiting from having so many organizations, kind of, you know, companies, whatever, open source projects, trying a bunch of different stuff out, and the best of it is probably what, you know, we're going to hang on to. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Here's what I did not like about AMP. So one is the price, and I think this goes back to the kinda cursor conversation. I think they give you, like, $5 worth of tokens. Don't quote me on the number, but they give you, like, a very small amount when you sign up. I blew through that. I was committed to, like, really trying it. I think in AMP's case, you don't even pick a plan, you just sort of
The paper
it's like a
token, I
budget.
think.
You pay per
Yeah.
token, right? So I threw $50 on there. I don't know if that's a casual amount of spam. I don't know, $50. And also trying to share how committed I was to trying this. I felt like I blew through quite a f I didn't spend all of that, but I probably spent $20, you know, and I don't know that I did a lot of work relative to that. That's one. And I think this just goes back to our earlier conversation of, like, there's something really comforting about knowing you're kinda protected or you've got, like, this really, you know, maxed out tier, right? You kinda work differently.
Yeah, knowing the cost definitely changes your behavior for sure.
Yeah, I didn't give it long-lived tasks. I think that's one. I felt that my tasks started to look a little bit more like maybe what they looked like 6 months ago where, you know, I'm editing and I'm kinda, like, prompting a little bit to get me further, and, like, there you know, it I did a pretty good job. That's one. The second thing is, one of the biggest benefits of AMP, it's like a pro and a con, and you touched on this last time, but I understand it more now. They take away your decision to choose a model, and they make that decision for you, and it's like, "Look, we are gonna build we're gonna just gonna have a great experience for you." And it is a good product. However, I think for me,
You want the choice.
I don't know it's not that I want the choice, hold on. I would like it to just work all the time, don't get me wrong. Like, I drive an automatic, okay? I drive an automatic. You know, I'd like an automatic in my coding editor. But the reason why I drive an automatic is because whether you drive a manual or an automatic, it doesn't matter. You're gonna get there. Your choice between a manual or an automatic, like, model, in terms of your coding agent, you might not get there. Does that make sense?
I could see it, because if AMP were to pick Codex, I don't know if I could work with it, because the model is so like, I don't like it.
What's happening under the hood could take you to a completely different place, and that's what I felt. My first experience, like, I put in a prompt, and AMP was super fast, and I was like, "Damn." But then the other part of me is like, "This should not be so fast, okay, for what I am asking it to do." Right? Like, I'm giving it sort of like a high level, "Hey, implement this high level feature for me." I'm not giving you, like, a lot of guidance here. And it just comes back as like, "Yeah, you want this. Here you go. Boom, 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 boom." I'm like, "I don't know. Did you even read the code?" It's like handing a junior programmer, like, a really intense task, and then they come back, like, 20 minutes later, and you're like, "You haven't done the homework."
So I use Pi obviously a lot recently, and so Pi famously has 4 used tools. Like it's the lowest tool use edit harness I know. It has edit, bash, read, write, run, bash, and then one other thing that I forgot. It's like it's the lowest amount it can do, and so specifically, it doesn't have a plan mode, right? And it turns out the way I talk to the machine, I don't need the plan mode, because and it also doesn't have permissions. It's YOLO only. But it's like I talk to the machine back and forth enough that the context has all in it. But I realized that not everybody is like this, and a lot of people need plan mode, because unless the model is specifically instructed to like go on a vision quest, it will not do so. And so like this modality really matters, I think, for a lot of people. And I think AMP, I'm pretty sure doesn't have a plan mode at the moment. And so like when I prompt, it doesn't matter, because like the way I talk to it, like if it has a plan mode, I wouldn't know, but I never use a plan mode. So like the way I talk to AMP is the same way as I talk to like Pi. And like for me, it doesn't do this sort of like do a whole bunch of stuff, because my prompting style is just like verbose as hell.
I think we talked about this last time, which is you just get really comfortable working with a model or a harness, and you start to develop a set of expectations for what you're going to get back and how it's going to work. And boy, I got put in like a different harness and a different model, and my trust level was on the floor, right? Um, Validly or invalidly. And I still got a bunch of work done, but it wasn't, I can't say that that's the model's fault or anything. It could be supposedly they use Gemini, or no, they don't. I don't know anymore. Like, this is like
No,
part of the
they
challenge.
use, I think they use Opus, like unless you pick the 1 week where they had like Gemini.
It could not have been based on how quickly it returned, you know? This would be a fun exercise, which is like a game show where you just like have,
What's the model?
yeah, what is the model? And it just streams out some text and, boom. Yeah.
Well, I know how to spot Codex. It randomly speaks Chinese and Russian. I have no idea what's going on, but like the amount of like random Chinese and Russian I'm getting in Codex is just bizarre. And not even real words, just like made up words.
Oh, fascinating. I think at Modem, we did have a moment where we were like, where did this Chinese string come from? Like, how did this wind up in the code base? And it was only one, and it's only ever happened once. So I learned that is a thing that can happen.
Codex is great at accidentally throwing like foreign character sets into it.
I don't have anything more to say about AMP. I thought it was a good product, moving on.
One of the reasons why I'm using Pi so much at the moment, which is built from a friend of mine, is not because actually particularly good coding agent. Like this is like the website is literally shitty coding agent.ai. But it has one feature that I keep going back to, which is branching. So basically what you do is you keep going, and then you hit this point where you notice like the agent sucks. Like it's going in circles, it's not making any progress. And what he can do at that point is he can branch to an earlier message. And then you say like, hey, like we're going back to where you didn't waste the last 25,000 tokens, and I'm going to tell you now how you fucked up. And we're going to continue from there. And I use this, like for instance, I use this to refine tickets over Christmas. I paid it like project manager, and I went to like, hey, here's how we're going to like work on this. And I had this massive milestone ticket. So I used 50,000 tokens of my context just to like talk through the milestone. And then I branched off there for every single sub ticket to refine it on GitHub. Like I was talking through the agent to refine the tickets, and I always branched back to the point where I already had the context primed, and I enjoyed that experience so much. Like it was just so refreshing, this idea of like going back up. I'm pretty sure like most of these things do it, but like in Pi was so obvious that you can do that. I was just like really, really enjoyable.
The advice lately has been, look, if you get to this point, just throw away the entire session and start over from scratch, frankly, right? And you're proposing, like, you don't have to do that. That would save me a lot of time. Like I could think even today I had a session that kind of went off the rails halfway, and I'm like, ugh, what is the best way for me to get to what I want? And I blew the whole session away and I restarted. So branching is cool.
So Pi is Mario Zechner's originally formerly minimal coding agent, which very few tools, tiny system prompt. Like the system prompt is, I would say about 900 tokens. Compared it to Claude, which has 4,500 or something. So it's like it starts out empty, and then you load in whatever you want.
By the way, can you take a moment here? Like, there's a lot of things called Pi. Can you?
Yeah.
How do I find this on the internet? Is this open source? Like,
so the website is shittycodingagent.ai.
Okay.
And it's intentionally called Mario intentionally. This is sort of like I'm kind of breaking his like original intention here, but he intentionally named it Pi so that nobody can find it.
Okay.
This is like in the announcement blog post, he was like, this is my coding agent. Like, I don't want to support an open source project.
I did not know this. I was not trying to deliberately mess with this, but I could not find it. So yeah, this checks out.
So it's this thing. And because it is so empty and is like a canvas, I have started doing what I call meta agentic programming with it, where I literally go to Pi and say like, Pi, build an extension to yourself.
Okay, but when you say like it has such a blank canvas, like what am I seeing? Is this a TUI? Is this a terminal experience?
It looks pretty much like a less flickery version of Claude Code.
Mhm.
There's a text box on the bottom, but it does some things really well. So one thing it does really well is it can render images. That to me is actually like a bit. My project over Christmas was a computer game. Turns out, if you build a computer game, it's very important for the agent to see pictures, which every agent can do. But I love also seeing the picture that the agent sees, because if the agent takes its own picture, I want to see the same picture, right? So seeing it like scroll by which picture, which screenshot it took, and which it read is really good. I love that aspect of it. But then because it is like such a blank canvas, which has just a bunch of tools, you have a lot of freedom to put your own shit into it. If you've used Claude Code, for instance, it has this thing where it sometimes asks you questions. So it's like the prompt comes up and sort of says like, here, like, here's a UI, pick a bunch of choices or add your own, right? I'm pretty sure I've seen this at one point. I like the idea of the agent asking me something, but I don't like it bringing up this UI, because like, if it brings up questions naturally, it's hidden somewhere in the text. So you have like here, like a bunch of options, and here's my prose that goes with it. So I like reading that, but answering is really annoying because now you have to like, oh yeah, on question 1, blah, 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 on question 2, blah, blah, blah. So I built this plugin where you press like command dot, and it then finds with another model all the questions in the text and then presents a UI so that I can quickly tap through the answers, if that makes sense.
I
That
gotta
for me
see it.
works really
Yeah.
well. Probably nobody else wants this, right? This works really well for me. So I'm like, yeah, this is how I want it. So it does it. Or I had another thing where like I was debugging something where I just felt like now is the time for it to have this other tool that I think could be quite interesting, where I let it basically draw me mermaid diagrams into the UI. Like the AMP does this too. Like I think AMP can draw mermaid things. But it's like, hey, like if you make a mermaid thing, like you have a way to show it in the UI now. And so it like had this. Anyways, it's a programmable coding agent. And one of the things you can do with it is just have it build itself skills, have it build itself extensions. And it's just fun. It's so much fun extending your own thing, basically.
I think I'm getting it now. This was the thing I needed earlier. The harness or whatever has access to modify itself. Is that what you're saying?
It basically has access to itself. I think with open code, you have a little bit of this because of this hook system, but I think it's not on the same level. I like, at least when I was I haven't used it in like that much in a while, but like when I was originally playing with it, it had a little bit of it, but not to the same degree, I would say.
All right, well, let's say Claude Code, which is closed source. I've not seen Claude try to rewire itself live, you know, right? But you're saying with Pi, you can have an experience where you're in the middle of like using it to write code for your software project. In the middle of that, you can be like, you know what? Just go and alter yourself this way because I think it would be helpful for me right now. Is that fair?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And I mean, like, there's many ways in which you could do this even better. It's like over time, like people that like this thing sort of started pushing a little bit in this direction. We're kind of reaching this point right now where like I feel like my expectation to one of those tools is that it writes itself a better solution to this problem because it got so good. And like this example that I did earlier today, a friend of mine was or like an acquaintance of mine was sharing this thing that he pointed Claude to an API of the Vienna Public Transport Service to tell him when like reverse engineer how to get an answer when the train leaves. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I wonder if I can do this for all of Austria. So I was pointing it to the website of the train service where you can book the tickets, which also has like the status update. And it's just literally like, Claude, here's the thing a friend of mine built, and here's the official API. Just whatever, build it. And it literally took less than 5 minutes to do that. And now I can talk to my Pi, and it routes me. And I was asking it earlier, like, can you give me a train from Vienna to Graz that uses the Czech train, not the Austrian one, which is impossible to do in the UI. And there's actually a utility to it. And now it does it. And I think like if I were to have paid for it in tokens, it would be like $2.50.
Okay, so you're also giving an example where almost like Pi can become the software that you are trying to build. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think like that's not necessarily Pi specific, right? You can have a lot of agents write skills for itself. Like we have reached this point where skills are really, really, really useful. But the way I use Pi, and I think the way a lot of people that are using Pi are pushing it towards, makes that just a little bit more like the kind of thing that feels natural in that environment. Because it is open, because it is very, very like blank
And
as a canvas.
because you're saying it can rewire its own UI, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Damn, you've sold me really hard. I gotta go. Do you have a video on this? I'm actually really curious.
I recorded a video, I think, with where I have like the question answer king show up. I mean, this is the other part. Like my Christmas project was a computer game, and I don't think I've had so much fun building something with an agent. And it was only 4.5 days that I worked on it. I'm pretty sure I didn't actually spend more than 8 hours actively on it. Like most of it was like me talking to the thing, making humongous plans with Opus, where like back and forth, like think for the game design, think for the engine design, all of this. And I was like, now let's make it 15 phase plan step by step. And then I was just like, okay, phase 1, validate. Like I let it build its own debugging tools to validate that the screen shows up correctly. And I just had like, now do this. And I didn't look at the code, anything. I was just like, does the game work better now than before? And it just kept prompting it. And it's like, to me, that's not responsible programming in a way. Like that, I don't do that at work. But it feels like this is real now. It's getting to the point where like I started thinking of this more of like, I intentionally prompted it so it can validate more or less the internal state from the outside through different observability. It's like it didn't look what the code is like. I was like, does it do the thing that I asked it to? Like, does it use the right algorithm? Does it like ask it to visualize the thing so I can just look at it? That to me was mind-boggling because I haven't been doing this before, and I really felt like that was a huge difference that like Opus and these models now support, that you can kind of do it this way. And yeah, I don't know.
Just to help me understand, so it's like you're building the game in such a way where you're feeding the state or you're feeding parts of it back to the agent to sort of like give it the context to build it better?
I basically asked the agent all the time what it would need to make better progress. So I was like, how would you debug this? And we did like a back and forth. And like all the way in the beginning, I was like, okay, so we're going to do this, but let's start with the debugging tools. And then every time it failed to use its own debugging tools, I went like, okay, I export the session from Pi. So it's like I pointed to like, give me the URL, to give me the file path where your session is. I rewind it back to earlier. And then I said with branch, and I said like, okay, so we tried to debug this now. This completely failed. Here's your session. Fix your debugging tool. I let it do this thing, rewind again, and said like, we improved the debugging tool, do it again. And I had like, it wrote its own debugging script system to dump state from the engine and to stepping and everything and screenshots. And it is amazing.
That's a very great and explicit use case example of the branching, which is you can spend some time debugging with it, right? And get some answers. And then you can use the branch to go back in time. All of that gets tossed out of the context, but you have it, or you've got like a minimal version of that you're going to copy paste, or now you know what you need to know and you're going to type it out.
But it's also specifically like the task of this was like implement this feature by which it has to use its own debugging tools, in which we learn the debugging tools are shit. So side quest, let's fix the debugging tools, go all the way back up. Now we have to fix debugging tools. Do we do a better job now? Right? And that kind of like meta engineering, like I didn't do that much before.
This is a whole other topic. I am doing a lot. We don't talk about our work that much on here, but this is actually a lot of how I'm working on Modem these days because it is an agent, and there's a lot of, hey, you didn't deliver a great answer. Can you? Why was that answer so horrible? Oh well, turns out I can't actually see this data. Gee, I didn't know. Thanks. I think and you can have that same experience with OpenCode, Claude Code, Cursor, etc. I think that's a pro tip, by the way, which is, how could I help you solve this problem, right? Or what would you need to be more effective in solving this problem? I think we believe that the models and have gotten better to the degree where like the answers are far more meaningful. But often the answers are like, oh, shit, yeah. Like that makes perfect sense. And I've had better debugging sessions by doing that as well.
There's this thing as like how these things should work, and there's the thing how the things work at the moment. And it's like, if I could wish for the system to work in a certain way, I probably wouldn't wish it to work like it does today. But then I was like, okay, now I need to now if I want to build my own agent, I need to live in a world that is really, really good at. What is it trained on? Source code. What is source code really good on? Fucking file systems. And now like everything that looks more like a file system, it's just really good at. Is the file system the best possible way to organize some stuff? Probably not. There's a reason we use databases. But right now, if you can represent your problem as something that looks similar to a file system, all of a sudden it works so much better. And so one of the things that I did a bunch of times now is like I said, like, hey, I do this with Claude because Pi doesn't have sub-agents. But I was like, hey, Claude, spawn 15 sub-agent. Let them all solve this problem. And then tell me afterwards how they solve this problem. And the one that, like, when it did, like, and it's like, don't Google it. I was like, if like 11 out of 15 sub-agents decided to solve it this way, I was like, this is now going to be my interface. I'm going to build this thing.
This
Because
is
I
the
increase the chances.
This is like the if you have infinite monkeys in a room, one of them was gonna write Shakespeare, but you're doing it with sub-agents.
But it's such an interesting pattern because like I don't know what the thing is, like we don't know what the RL is that's going into these models, so the reinforcement learning, right? We can only guess. But we can kind of like probe the models and say like, okay, for instance, like I have this little plugin for Pi that brings up I don't actually use it, but I was just curious, that can render like custom UI because David Siegel did this thing where he built this like little thing, I think, which is like React to show TUI components. So it's like, hey, I want to book a calendar thing, and then it makes this thing here. I was like, okay, I want to have the same thing. I was like, okay, how would you do it? I had this idea. It's like, I'm going to do this and this. And I was like, how would you do it? I was like, oh yeah, this sounds like a React problem. Can you give me JSX? I was like, okay, then let's do JSX and render that to the terminal. I wouldn't have opted for that, but it's very good at JSX. So like, that's what we did. We ended up doing JSX.
Yeah, I think if I'm trying to extract this out for people who might be listening, it's like you may have a strong notion of what the solution is based on your experience, but the agent is different and it has its own experience. And if you can prompt it to help figure out what it is good at, right? You don't have to guess very much anymore. Is that fair? Like you can have a conversation about like, what do you think you'd be the most successful at?
And it might actually be wrong and it might hallucinate, but then you test it and it's like, oh, you told me this is like your optimal solution, but here I see you failing with your proposed optimal solution. Let's learn from this.
They do still lie. That's a whole other topic. I almost feel like that could be an entire follow-up episode. When I look back at what we're talking about today and what we were talking about a month ago, it's incredible to me that things are still changing. So what do you think this conversation is going to look like in a month?
I will no longer give predictions. I think this is sort of my main thing.
Yeah, but
I
look,
think that
okay, most podcasts, and I've listened to a few, start of the year, they're like, oh, what do you think is going to happen this year? Okay. The timeline is a year is too long now. So we are going to do our January 2026 prediction. Do you see what I'm saying? Like we're going to do monthly predictions. What do you think?
man, this is hard. I think that there will be definitely more people using skills. And I think maybe this is the one prediction I actually feel somewhat confident about, is that what will make MCP work a little bit better is deferred tool loading with skills, where you basically you have your MCP server, but it's not there yet. And then you load a skill to figure out like what the MCP server is actually capable of doing. I feel like we will see a little bit of this. That's going to be my prediction, I think.
Yeah, these are like, there's predictions and there's things that I want, right?
No, I think it's going to happen because skills are taking off. Like skills are like people are discovering skills, right? And so like everybody who built an MCP is like, okay, how am I getting in on this?
I mean, the point here is that we don't know if we're right or wrong. We just get to say stuff. And if you're right, you can celebrate it. And if you're wrong, no one's going to remember and you can just move on with your life. So that's the great thing about predictions. All right, here's my prediction. Okay. This is to bring it full circle. Cursor is not laying down. Cursor is going to show up with, they're going to show up with something and they're going to fight back. And I don't know what it is, but I think like the big theme of this is that, yeah, like Claude is good, but also the harnesses are good. Or is it just Claude? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, I have a question. This is sort of like maybe it's like a meta. It's not a prediction, but it's sort of like a let's wager on it a little bit. Will there be more or fewer coding harnesses at the end of the quarter that people actually use? And I was just thinking about this because like I was pretty sure windsurf is going away and people still use it. Right? So it's like at least I think so far none of these things died out. So now I want to like, will there be more? Because so far it feels like there's still more. Or will there be fewer?
I don't think a quarter is long enough time for there to be meaningful thrash. And that's mostly just because the market is so big and the opportunity is so big that I think we're going to see people stick around. I guess I'd bet on there being more, you know? I don't know that there's room in anybody's brain for more, but I think what you've taught me is that there is still opportunity to innovate, right? There are still innovation opportunities in the harnesses. And so maybe someone will come up with like a really totally different take on this, which would be exciting. I don't know.
Do you think it will be more?
Yeah, I guess so.
It's probably a safe bet. I would probably not bet against this.
All right. Well, let's I guess we'll come back 1 quarter. We'll come back on this to see, you know, what the next one is. Code Rabbit's gonna have one. I don't know. Okay.
There is actually one thing I will predict, and mostly just because of like very, very recent trends. I think personal agents like Claudebot are going to be a thing in a month. Remote controlled, like text message to agent, get thermostat reading and turn on and off lights and tell my wife that I'm going shopping, stuff like this.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I've wanted to use this. Like I tried Vibe Tunnel when you guys made that, and I just found it hard. I think I hit some port issue, and I was like, I debugged it for like an hour with Tailscale, and I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm done. You know, and I think until we surpass that, I'm not sure. But maybe Cloudbot uses WhatsApp, right? So that's like maybe a solution where it just sort of like uses a very like public interface. Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think it is. The interface makes it more approachable, but also like the agents are getting good enough that people are like really, really crazy with them. Like, oh, it's like it spawns like shit in my Docker container. I don't care. It's like,
We're gonna have to come back to this. There's no time for this. I think you know what is
but
Cloudbot?
I think we will revisit Cloudbot in a month to see where it stands.
Okay, that's a good place to stop. All right. Thanks everybody. Till next time.
Bye bye.